right? So he brings up the question, why such an arduous process? Why evolution and human history? And he starts here with the whole evolution of species and the evolutionary nature of the universe to get to the point where there was complex life on Earth. And he says, this is again 12 or more billion years, right? Why is the universe exploding and developing for 12 or more billion years? This seems kind of rough. And also, like, why did it take so long even for humans to appear? Before we got to human history and the way that evolves as a part of creation. Why did it take so long just to get to there, right? And what about all these wrong turns and dead ends in evolution that apparently led to nowhere? What about all the species that just died out, right? What about all the species that were in conflict with each other, eating each other kind of to survive? What about the Neanderthals, right? That's the one I always think about. They seem nice enough, right? Didn't they a nice group? Did they live their lives? And apparently they had a very developed emotional lives and familiar societies and things like, they were a lot like us. Why'd they have to die out? Seems kind of rough on them. They only survived through 3% of our DNA or something. So this is the kind of question that he's asking, like, why did God do it this way? It seems like kind of a rough way. It seems like a lot of things just ended up as dead ends or going nowhere within the evolutionary process. And he says then, again, human history is part of this evolutionary process. Why all the wrong turns and dead ends? Right? Why do you have all these highly developed societies? And if we look back and try to trace some of the development of some of these societies, some of them were quite civilized, really see the things just growing in the right direction, and then they fall apart and they're done, right? These great civilizations of the past. And why do we end up, why the wrong turns? Why do we have these terrible wars? Why do we have child soldiers is the example I put a picture of here. So all kinds of terrible things, right, have happened within the human history. We say, well, we're evolving as a society, we're growing. Yeah, true, but we can see that happening. But we also see these terrible, steps back, so to speak, right? Where, oops, now it seems like we're going in the wrong direction, right? This is kind of an experience maybe that some Americans are having now. We see the idea within politics today that, okay, wait a minute, we're going the wrong direction now, right? Something needs to change, right? Again, I'm not being political here, but look at the idea of change, right? And that we're going in the wrong direction has been a major theme of both major parties. So Lofink is going to bring up the question then, why is there a history at all? Why is there an evolution, right? Why did God do it this way? Why 12 billion years of mostly things that didn't lead up to much, right? Mostly 12 billion years of things that are a lot of dog eat dog, so to speak, things, a lot of death and suffering, right? What's the deal? Well, he says, imagine the opposite first. If you want to understand the way it is, think about if it wasn't that way, right? And so what would the opposite of development and evolution, what would the opposite of this process of changing and growing life be? Well, it would be everything created in its final form. It would things would be frozen the way they are, right? It would be no choice, no free will. Everything would just be created the way that it is meant to be in its final form, right? You would just be where you were headed to, right? Think about that. So this would then mean that there would be no free will. You wouldn't have choices to go this way or that way because you wouldn't be going anywhere, right? Nothing would be moving in any direction, much less in a forward progression of sorts, as we see in the process of evolution and human history at times, right? So it's like Lofing puts it, the possibility of changing oneself presumes constant movement in human beings and in the world around them, right? A person can only change, and that's what happens in the process of evolution in human history. We see change, right? That's what goes on. A person can only change, that can only happen if he or she can enter into a new constellation of reality, right? So there has to be the possibility of doing things different way. There has to be movement in order for there to be choice and free will, right? You can't just be frozen, perfect, so to speak, right? You have to say, I can move over here, or I can move over here. There's a new way of seeing things and doing things, and here's a new way of seeing things and doing things. I can't just, since things are always changing, I can't just stay in the same way of doing things, right? So you got to make some choices. And he uses the story of Zacchaeus, who changed his life just kind of by the subtle choice of, I want to climb up this tree and see Jesus, right? And it as he has a new perspective from climbing up the tree, right, he can see things in a wider way. All of a sudden, he sees these he's open to these new constellations, and he accepts Jesus inviting himself over to his house, and he's opened up and living in now a whole new constellation, a whole new reality, where instead of trying to hoard things for himself, he is sharing things. He is sharing his things with others, right? Just like God is sharing his very self with us in and through his creation. So, as Lofink puts it, history is nothing but a sequence of constantly new constellation of reality presented to human freedom. Right? So you can see that he's seeing the main element of reality. Right? This angle that he's taking is he's starting with human freedom. Right? He says that's the biggest reality in our lives. Right? And that in turn presupposes a constant movement of things and people. That the free will or choices that human beings have, that's the realest thing that we experience in some ways. So what is there that makes that possible, right? What is the possibility, the condition for the possibility of this experience of free will? Well, it's this constant movement of things and people, right? I got to be able to go over there or go over here. Right? I got to be able to, things are always moving where I'm at too, so that it's not possible just to sit right there, right? And so he makes a statement there that evolution and history are therefore crucially bound up with human freedom. You understand how it all goes together, right? You have movement and therefore you have choice. The movement is the framework, right, in which choice is revealed. So therefore, right, God desires that creation should be much greater and freer than we imagine it. So he sees the will of God in this, right, that this is what God's trying to do. This is God's will, that we are free. So why didn't God just create us perfectly loving, right? Why didn't God just create us, right, in our final form, right, in that potential in which we are have the ability to develop into now? Well, because it would eliminate free will, right? We have to have the choice not to love, right, if we're going to choose to love. And that's what love is. Love is an expression of free will. Love is when you care about someone, right? When you want to help them, but you don't have to, right? It's something you choose to do because you love the person, right? And so he points out that God, the way that God created us through this process, this arduous process of development and evolution, shows that he loves us. Because if you love someone, you will their development. If you love someone, you give them the time to become the person that they can be. You give them the time to develop into the person who can love, right? Who can realize that possibility, right? Who can respond to the love you have for them in freedom, right? I mean, there's all kinds of corny love songs about this, right? You can't make someone love you, right? And God is not desiring human love because he has some kind of a confidence problem, right? God desires humans to not specifically to love him, but to love like him, right? To share in his divine nature, right? To love unconditionally so that we can experience his joy. Because that's what love does. It creates and shares itself. And you can't share love without free will. And you can't have free will without this constant movement and choice. Therefore, what? Creation through a developmental process. One final point Lofink makes in this chapter, which is somewhat superfluous to what we've been talking about so far, but he points out that for the Israelites, in contrast to the Neoplatonist Greek philosophers, the superabundance of created things is a sign of the overflowing goodness of God. So the diversity of life, right? And again, our understanding might be a little even more profound than theirs in this, because we understand that there's been not just the diversity of life that we see on Earth now, but there's been countless, species that have come and gone, right, within the process of bringing things to what they are now, right, and bringing things to what they will be in the future. So this is a sign of God's generosity, his prodigal nature.